All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
A new warning from the CDC about another mystery illness, this one involving sudden paralysis in children. There are fears this is in some way connected to that virus outbreak now confirmed in children in at least 40 states. We get details tonight from NBC's Hallie Jackson in Aurora, Colorado.
Late this afternoon, doctors at a Colorado hospital described the questions surrounding 10 children treated here, some too weak to move one arm or leg, others not able to move any of them.
It's a time will tell sort of thing. It's a very long road. It's still too early to know what the recovery will be for these children.
This medical mystery has health experts looking for clues, like whether it's just coincidence that 4 children with paralysis tested positive for a rare strain of virus, or whether it's something more.
At this point, we have no specific direct linkage. That is the area of investigation.
An unusual outbreak of Enterovirus 68 is now affecting 443 people across the country, virtually all of them children. So this Denver daycare is taking steps to stay safe.
Do you get a sense from parents that they're worried?
Very. Anything that they can do as an extra precaution to make sure that their children are kept healthy. And so they have been inquiring.
Just 2 years ago, mysterious muscle weakness and paralysis affected a group of children in California.
Hi, Daddy.
Including Lucian Oliveira. His leg went limp permanently after his mom noticed he had trouble breathing, though he was never tested for Enterovirus 68.
I was devastated for these families. We have lived through this for the past 2.5 years.
I was wheezing and I didn't feel good at all.
In Colorado, Jaden Broadway was treated for the Enterovirus strain this month. He's now back in school. His family knows they've been lucky. They just don't know why.
I'm so sorry to hear about the other children who are suffering at this degree with it. But Jaden is doing real good, and we feel like we're really blessed.
Over the last month, 4,000 children have come to this hospital with severe respiratory problems, and doctors here say the ER has had some trouble keeping up. Experts say it's possible millions of kids across the country have Enterovirus 68, but for most of them, it's showing up as just a bad cold. Brian?
How scary for the kids and their families. Hallie Jackson, Aurora, Colorado, for us tonight. Thanks.
Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and in this hour of the X Zone, we're going to be talking about Enterovirus D68. Our guest this hour is Dr. John Young, a long-time emergency room physician now specializing in the treatment of chronic and genetic diseases. And he notes that children are becoming infected. They have underlying lung or neurological disease. And joining me now is Dr. Young. And Dr. Young, welcome to the X Zone, sir.
Thanks for having me.
What are enteroviruses?
Well, there's really hundreds of viruses.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them, a large majority, they don't even bother the human. Some viruses attack only animals, things like that. But and these viruses can change. Viruses can be more virulent or more deadly, or become less virulent or less deadly. So viruses change over time,
mm-hmm.
but this is a group of viruses. This is a group of virus that is kind of related to polio, which back in the 40s and 50s. But strains change, and this one has become a little more vicious than we've seen in the past. But the interesting thing about it is this: And with all illnesses, the people that seem to be most affected are those
mm-hmm.
that have underlying immune system problems.
Now, I understand that there are more than 100 types of enteroviruses, and it's estimated that 10 to 15 million enterovirus infections occur in the U.S. each and every year. What is so different between the enteroviruses that are seen, the 10 to 15 million that are seen over the year in the U.S., compared to Enterovirus D68?
Well, we have the ability to really, in other words, think of a large school.
Mm-hmm.
You go into high school, and we can break it down to there's Mary Smith and Jim Jones, and we've been able to do that with viruses. We can actually break them down to each specific type of virus.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, excuse me, the D68, we've been able to identify in doing cultures on a number of these patients. And so that's how we've come about identifying it. And I think the other thing is this. You can do a nose culture, and you're going to pick up a lot of organisms, or a lot of viruses.
Mm-hmm.
But what they pick up is, hey, this is enterovirus, and we've just done 20 patients, and the interesting thing is all 20 of them have this very unique enterovirus. So they're going to say, hey, this is what we're dealing with, which is what I would say, and then we need to be on the lookout for this type of virus.
Dr. Young, please stand by. We've got to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Exonation, Dr. John Young is our very special guest this hour, and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue speaking about Enterovirus D68 this hour here in the X Zone from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. For more information on Enterovirus D68, you can go to www.cdc.gov, and they have several front-page links to EV-D68. Dr. John Young is our special guest. And, Doctor, what is the current situation in the U.S. and EV-D68?
Well, we've only seen it in a few areas, but it's starting to show up, and I predict by December you're going to see it in every state in the U.S.
Wow.
Well, just because we travel so much.
Mm-hmm.
And, the other thing is, a lot of this is, probably in my practice, I may have seen one or two already, but the thing is, it shows up so benign. Listen, it's just the common cold, don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the person has a good immune system, and it's no big deal. Where the doctor gets into trouble is this. I think your child just has this little virus going around, a little common cold. And then the next thing you hear is a couple days later, hey, I took my kid to the emergency room because he wasn't moving his legs. Uh-oh, now we're getting into something serious. So we don't, what it usually shows up just very benign as just a little cough,
mm-hmm.
sniffles, and we see that all the time, and what most of us do, just ignore it. But then when it goes into the difficulty breathing, maybe a neurological problem, then we go and do the spade work to figure out, all right, let's culture this patient up. What are we dealing with? And then we see 68 come up.
So, when was the first time Enterovirus D68 was ever diagnosed in the United States?
I don't know. I don't know that. Okay. I do know it was before this year. We've had some cases in the past, but this seems to be a year of just a really virulent outbreak.
What makes this year so different?
I'll just give you some theories because there's going to be a ton of theories. But I'll say this, that I know that down here in Florida, when we have a cold, what we call cold winter, that it does tend to depress a lot of these organisms. And so, they aren't as abundant. But then when we have a very mild winter like we've had over the last few years, a lot of these organisms don't seem to be suppressed. And I start to see more sickness in the winter than I would normally see in a colder weather.
Are other continents around the world also finding a spike in the diagnosis of EV-D68 in children?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. Okay. But what would be interesting is to go back and, I was a medical doctor in South Africa for a number of years, and go back and look at South Africa, talk to their medical system, and see back in June, July, when they were in their winter, were they picking up EV-68? That would be the very interesting thing.
I understand that with the onset of winter, that more cold signs and symptoms are being brought to the attention of medical practitioners, both in the doctor's office and in the emergency departments of hospitals and walk-in clinics. But it's not wintertime. What is triggering the virus? I understand that all viral infections have a trigger point.
Well, a couple of things. One is that most of the cases, especially like in Colorado, most of the cases, if you looked at, there was an immune system problem. There was chronic asthma. There was some genetic problems. In other words, the kid had some kind of chronic problem. So basically, these people are immune compromised.
Okay.
And so they are going to be much more susceptible than the average person, because you need somewhat of a viral load. In other words, one virus probably isn't going to bother you. You need a certain amount of that virus to really cause problems. And so, the immune system can take care of a lot of this, but if you have a compromise, you just can't take care of a whole host of viruses that are attacking you.
Now, according to our information, from mid-August to October the 1st of this year, a total of 500 people in 42 states in the District of Columbia have been confirmed to have the respiratory illness caused by EV-D68. And there's only four states, including Florida, that up until earlier today have not reported any cases of EV-D68. As a doctor, does this make sense?
Well, yeah, because I'll tell you, it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen. I mean, we could be talking a week from now, and Florida may have 30 cases. So as people are traveling, it's going to hit right here. So now, what it's going to do to the doctor's office and to the emergency rooms is the parents are going to be just flooding us because, was that a sneeze? Was that a runny nose? You're going to be heading off to get it diagnosed. The other thing is, it gets to be very, very expensive, to be able to, a doctor's office is not going to be prepared and able to take every single patient and do swabs to look for this virus.
Why not?
Well, just because they don't have the kits. And the other thing is, it just becomes very costly. I mean, you're trying to load the whole U.S., all the doctor's offices, everything, with the kits to be able to grab the virus.
But isn't that what the CDC is for?
Well, that's why they're talking about now. Send them to the public health department, call CDC, get something like that. So they what you end up doing is you end up flooding the public health departments.
Is it possible then, sir, that Enterovirus D68 was actually strengthened and released on the public for nefarious reasons?
I wouldn't go there, and mainly for this. I think that we do know that organisms change. I remember, and I'm dating myself a little bit, when I was in high school, there was an organism, a bacteria called Serratia marcescens. And every high school student in 10th grade looked at that and noticed the red color and all of that. Then in the mid-70s, that organism seems to have changed and became very virulent. In fact, a number of people caught a deadly pneumonia from it and died. So these organisms can change. So before I'd go about, did someone release it and so on, I would probably not go there first. I would probably, say that organisms can become more virulent and less virulent.
Okay, so
less deadly.
If we have a youngster 5, 6, 7 years of age and up, they can say, "Mommy, I don't feel good. Mommy, I can't move my limbs, and my arms are sore, my legs are sore." But what happens in the case of an infant?
Well, in the event, what you're going to do is, and parents I think are very good at this, at least, you're always looking at your kid, is notice, hey, wasn't, Johnny more active yesterday? Wasn't he? How come he's not moving that left leg very much? And so the parents, at least in my practice that I see, are usually very vigilant, and knowing that there is something out there. If they see that, hey, the baby's not moving his left side, they will get, and I hope they get to the doctor emergency room as soon as possible.
How about senior citizens? I understand there are now cases of Enterovirus D68 being diagnosed in seniors.
Right, and what do you see in the seniors? Just from their age, they tend to be a little more immune compromised. And, they got it from, listen, my grandson was here the other day, or, brought him in. He had little sniffles, but, I've got to give him some hugs and kisses. And the next thing you know, it's spreading around the nursing home.
So how can people best prevent contracting Enterovirus D68?
Well, it comes back to what your parents told you years ago. I mean, the first thing is washing your hands with soap and water. Number 2 is keep your hands away from your face. If you're, if you're around the toilet in the bathroom, be careful what you touch. The shaking of hands. A lot of people now, in my practice, they're just, kind of touching elbows.
Right.
And you know what? I thought that was crazy, but now with all the sickness out there, I'm thinking that's pretty smart. Keeping the surfaces clean, disinfectant, doing things like that. I know if you're changing the baby's diaper, make sure you wash afterwards thoroughly. But it's really just common sense right there.
So the fact that we really don't know where Enterovirus D68 is coming from, how do we really eradicate it then?
Well, if a kid, if I was back when I was working in the emergency room, if he showed up with this and said, okay, this is the diagnosis. All right, so we're going to put him in isolation, but we will pump them with antibiotics. And in a way, I hate to say it, it's because this is about all we know. We are not real good at the viral element. We can do the herpes with some of the acyclovir drugs out there. But when it comes to viruses overall, we just really don't have, like we have antibiotics to kill bacteria. So we'll give antibiotics because on the idea that, they have a weakened immune system, they may be susceptible for staph pneumonia or something like that, which is a bacterial, so we'll give them that. But basically what you're doing is you're just kind of treating symptoms and trying to support the immune system. Now, that's what the typical doctor is doing. But being a little bit of a maverick and having worked in Africa, I think there's some other things that we also need to learn.
All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take a pause here. I've got to take my news break. Exo Nation Dr. John Young is our special guest. For more information on the Enterovirus D68, www.cdc.gov. And if you have any concerns, if you're worried about your children, your seniors, that they may have Enterovirus D68, go to your local emergency room or contact your family physician. My name is Rob McConnell. This is The X Zone. We'll be back after the news. Don't go away.
Another virus. This one is sending hundreds of American kids to the hospital. The Enterovirus is taking a dangerous new turn. The CDC is investigating whether muscle weakness or paralysis in non-Colorado kids is connected to the virus.
Exonation, Dr. John Young is our special guest of this hour. His website is www.younghealth.com. We're talking to Dr. Young about the Enterovirus D68, and it seems as if it popped out of nowhere. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know how it started. Basically, how do we treat it? Just by giving it antibiotics and allowing the immune system to get better?
Well, I mean, that's really what we're doing. And, it's very interesting. I spent a number of years as a physician in Africa, in Swaziland, and South Africa. And the problem with a lot of the treatments that we've developed is for the third world, and I think this also goes back to Ebola, that they become so expensive that the third world can't afford them. And so, working in the third world for a number of years, we've had to come up with other ways to kind of help the body fight some of these infections. And I think it's very interesting. One of the ways, and I learned this from Professor Hollick at Harvard, who's probably the world's foremost expert on vitamin D, is that vitamin D is a hormone, not a vitamin, it's a hormone. And it's amazing. When you get vitamin D levels up, vitamin D as in dog, up, it supercharges the immune system. And not levels over 31, which is considered adequate, but levels over, 60, 70. And I've seen that in my patients with some of these immune problems, immune-compromised patients, that when I get the vitamin D levels up, they're not as sick. They're able to fight a lot of the infections much easier.
Right.
But we don't, we really aren't interested in that because vitamin D is too cheap. But we sure did that overseas in Africa, is we would get the vitamin D levels up, and it did help these immune-compromised people fight infections like this much, much better.
Now, vitamin D, isn't that also used for helping with painful bones, painful bones? Doesn't it have something to do with building up the calcium? It has
a lot to do with bones. It has, basically this, every cell in your body has a vitamin D receptor.
Right.
It has a lot to do with depression. It has a lot to do with eyesight. You name it, vitamin D is part of that. But most Americans do not get adequate levels of vitamin D. And so they don't have an immune system that's really able to fight a lot of this. We keep people inside, and they don't get that much sun anyways because we've been told that sun's evil. And so you have a weakened immune system. So what we did in Africa is you keep the vitamin D levels up higher, the body's able to attack these viruses on a much more successful basis.
Well, being in Africa, Doctor, wouldn't that give the people there plenty of sunshine? Wouldn't the sun naturally build up their vitamin D if it has something to do with the immune system? Why do we have such a low immune system in Africa if, like you said, vitamin D is the answer, and vitamin D is found mostly in the sun?
All right, here's the reason. Number one is if you are dark-skinned, very dark-skinned, you do not absorb vitamin D that readily, number one. Number two, the best hours to absorb vitamin D are probably between 11 and 1:30. If you're spending a lot of time indoors, you're not going to be out the prime time to absorb vitamin D. And the other thing is, and the Germans did a lot of this work years ago, if you don't have a cell membrane that basically is a battery with a positive charge on the outside, a negative charge on the inside, when sunlight hits those charges, those charges make vitamin D within that cell. If you have a poor cell membrane, meaning one where you've had a lot of hydrogenated oils ingested, you're going to make very little vitamin D. So it has to do with more than just being out in the sun. You have to look at that cell membrane. You have to look at the color of the skin. There's just a lot of reasons why people do not have adequate levels of vitamin D.
Well, here's a question for you then, sir. The cases of Enterovirus D68 that are being reported throughout the United States, is there a Is there a noticeable difference in the number of African Americans that are being reported with D68 compared to Caucasians?
I have not seen that breakdown yet. I have not seen that breakdown. But I'll tell you, that would be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Okay, so if a parent goes to the ER, goes to their family practitioner or their walk-in clinic, and the doctor says, I believe your child has enterovirus D68. All right. I know if somebody told me that, I'd go off the loop if it was my grandchild or one of my kids. How concerned should parents be that their child was diagnosed with EV-D68?
Well, you mean, in other words, where the doctor said, all right, you have a cold and all that. Now, did they send the child to the health department for cultures?
Yeah, it's been confirmed. It's been confirmed.
All right. I'd be concerned for a couple things. One is, I want to make sure that I'm protecting the rest of the members of my household. Or the kids, I'd let the parents know, hey, listen, your son's been with mine at the playground at school. I think you need to take him to the doctor or watch him. But then I would watch that kid very closely. And if I see that he's starting to deteriorate, I'm at that children's ER in about 2 seconds. So I'm saying it's watching. I'd load the kid up with vitamin D, and I'd make sure it has no sugar. What's the day? One day of the year where most kids are absent from school is the day after Halloween, because sugars depress the immune system. So I would do some basic things, but really it's watching.
All right, so
hydration, good hydration.
If sugar is one of the main things to keep kids away from, or if they have EV-D68, could the increased number of kids being diagnosed with EV-D68 be because of the diet that they have, the junk food they're eating? Everything is laced with sugar these days. Could this be a major cause of it?
I would say yes, because we know that sugar depresses the immune system. And the kids are going to school with their Gatorade.
Yeah.
The most they sweat is when they got on the school bus. So, in other words, everything is sugar-coated, and so that does depress the immune system. And I will say this. As I look back over, when I was in elementary school and high school years ago and today, I do think that there are more and more absence is more of a problem than when I was in school a number of years ago.
I agree. I remember when I was going to school way back when, we used to have a milk break in the morning, in the middle of the morning. We'd get a pint of milk. The teacher would be reading a story. We'd have our milk. And the same thing would happen in the afternoon. And I can't recall kids being sick, or I think that if I had 3 days off due to illness in the entire time I was going through elementary school through high school, that's a lot.
And now instead of a milk break, what do they get? A juice break.
Yep, sugar.
Give them the juice.
Unreal. Let's say a child has asthmatic problems. Should the parents be more concerned, more vigilant?
Yes. Any person, any child with a chronic problem, be it, let's say, even people that have, the diabetic, the arthritic kids, juvenile arthritis, the asthmatics, they're immune compromised by definition. So you want to be a little more careful with there. And so you're going to be making sure that, this little cough, is it turning into bronchitis and then turning into pneumonia?
Right.
So I think you need to be a little more vigilant there.
What are the schools doing to stop or to curb the possibilities of EV-D68 being contracted or being brought into the school by a child?
Well, down here, what they're basically saying is this: listen, if your kid's running a fever, got the runny nose, feeling sick, please keep them home.
Well, isn't that common sense at any time?
Yes, but I think now they're going to make more of an issue of it, where, like, ma'am, you dropped your kid off, but by the time we got him to the class, the nose is running. You need to come back and pick him up.
That's the way it is these days. Just take little Tommy or Sally to school. There you've got a babysitter for 8 or 9 hours. Then you bring them home, sit them in front of the TV, and let them play with their computer games until it's time for bed. Then let them go to bed with their handheld devices, and it starts all over again the next day. How about cleanliness, all right? At home, you can keep your home clean. But once the child is out of your protective bubble of cleanliness, what happens then? All right, I understand you wash your hands, you keep your hands away from your face. That's great for you. But in society, once you're outside that protective bubble, you're an open target.
You're right. So, it comes down to this. And I've been to a number of seminars all over the world on this. But even with cancer, what it is the immune system lets you down. Because they say that the body kills about 75,000 cancer cells a day. So what you're really saying is this. You're going out in the world, little Johnny, 8-year-old kid, he's at school. You hope that you've taught him to wash his hands after using the bathroom, wash his hands before eating. If someone, don't be drinking from someone else's cup and things like that. But, I mean, I've been in medicine for 20-plus years, and I will tell you this. All my patients who have strong immune systems, they all live longer and healthier. It really does come down to building a strong immune system. The other important part to remember about the immune system, we touched on it earlier when we talked about sugars. And I tell people, listen, if God asked me, I would have had the immune system made out of Skittles because my kids love Skittles. But unfortunately...
Who doesn't love Skittles?
But unfortunately, the immune system, IgG, IgE, IgA, IgM, they're all proteins.
Yeah.
And if you look at the American diet, if you look at the basic textbooks, you need about 1 gram of protein for every 2.2 pounds of body weight. And I look at these kids, and breakfast is a Pop-Tart. Where's the protein there?
None.
Lunch, maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a Gatorade, and some Skittles. Dinner is spaghetti. You tell me how much protein's there. And that is why, without the protein, you don't have much of an immune system.
All right, let me ask you this then, sir. How many of the patients, I don't think you would know this, but wouldn't it also be interesting to know how many patients with EV-D68 are vegetarians? Because there's no protein in vegetarianism, is there?
Well, vegetables have protein. They don't have as much, and they're not a complete protein. One of the amino acids is taurine. To get taurine, it can only come from animal products. There's some very interesting studies out there showing that vegetarians do not live as long as people that take in meat, chicken, fish, things like that.
But are they healthier?
Well, the thing is this. I find that I think up to a point the vegetarians do very well. Because also most vegetarians are very, very concerned about their health. So they're going to do a lot of activity. They're going to work to keep slim, a lot of physical activity, yoga, things like that. So they do take care of their bodies. But I go back to this. You need protein to make an immune system. It is very, very difficult in the U.S. to get enough protein from the vegetables that we grow because our soil is so poor. If you're from India, it's much easier for a person from India to get the protein in from their vegetables than it is for an American.
Why is that?
We think, hey, listen, I had a tossed salad and I had broccoli, so that's fine. No, broccoli has certain amino acids. Squash has certain amino acids. In other words, there's no one vegetable that has the complete protein.
So it sounds to me, doctor, that what needs to happen is that once we need to be better educated on our diets. That we need to know what is the best fuel to feed this engine. We take better care of our cars than we do our bodies.
You're right. And so we'll spend more on the cars than on our bodies.
Yeah.
We'll put junk food in our mouth, but we will not put crummy oil in our car or crummy gas.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're right. It is an education. I get very nervous, though, when people say, all right, all I'm going to do is eat, fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that when people go one way overboard, they usually have problems later on with certain nutritional deficiencies. So I like the fruits and vegetables. I like the oils, and I like the proteins.
Personally, Doctor, I like a big rib steak.
All right.
Potatoes.
And that is a great protein source.
Yeah, you see, my wife will tell you that I'm a meat eater. I love my meat, I love my potatoes, I love my veggies, I love my dairy products, but I try to balance my meals. Mind you, I was taught that as a young boy living at home, and I've passed it on to our children, and I hope that they're passing it on to their grandchildren. Mind you, I'm sorry to hear that Skittles will have to be off the diet. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with my guest this hour, Dr. John Young, www.younghealth.com. We'll be back. Don't go away. Exonation, our guest this hour is Dr. John Young. We've been talking about Enterovirus D68. His website is younghealth.com. That's www.younghealth.com. And for more information on Enterovirus D68, as well as the growing concerns about Ebola, visit the CDC at www.cdc.gov. First of all, Dr. Young, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, sir. What can you tell us about Ebola? You see, if I was the government, the first thing I would do is I would stop all air traffic from entering the United States that originated or had passengers on from the parts of Africa where Ebola is. Now, why they haven't done that, I don't know. I think they're missing the loop here like they did with the war in Syria. But that's another show, another topic. What can you tell us about Ebola, and do you see it getting worse in the United States?
Okay. Ebola really, it's been around for a while, and we had some problems in more central Western Africa a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. It seemed to have kind of died out and didn't hear much. And now it's sprung up again, and it actually seems, I think, a little more virulent, a little more deadly. And when you really, in the reports that I've read, is this. I don't think people really have a good handle on exactly how it's spread. Because some stuff that I've read is there's been people that have been very, very, very aware of the possibility of catching the virus, have really gone out of their way to protect themselves, and they've come down with it. Is it airborne? Well, we say no, but, is it just bodily fluid? Right now, I'm going to tell you, if I knew of someone that having Ebola, I wouldn't even want to be in the same room as them. Because we really do not have a good handle on how this organism is spread.
I was speaking to somebody a couple of months ago, and they were telling me that the CDC ordered several thousand plastic coffins, several thousand plastic the bags that they put deceased people in, that they ordered several hundred refrigerated cadaver cars for railroad. Is it possible that they knew or they had a suspicion that this Ebola virus was coming over to the United States, was spreading into the United States, that there was no way that they could actually stop it, and this is their way of preparing because they really don't have a handle on it?
Well, I mean, it's very possible. World Health Organization, I think, has done a pretty good job working with governments around the world of getting reports. Oh, hey, Liberia's called us up, let us know that they've had 2 cases of Ebola in the last week. And then they'll start to watch that and start to become aware of, hey, we've got a problem over here in West Africa, we got a problem here in Indonesia, whatever. So they get some advance notice. And I do think that in today's flying, rapid, movement of people, it's going to be very difficult to stop people from coming in unless you really find out where the flights originated. Because, listen, everything to the U.S. goes through Paris or London. There's no direct flight from Liberia.
No, there isn't.
So you've got to find out, now, you're right, as you said earlier. Who, on your flight here, London to Atlanta, started earlier in Liberia?
Well, they would know that through the ticketing route.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have to start to. Now you're gonna have to start to probably be a little more vigilant and say, hey, you guys have to be quarantined at least so many days before you can come in.
Dr. Young, I want to thank you so much for joining us, sir. It's been a great pleasure. I hope that we have the opportunity of having you back on the show.
All right, enjoyed it, and take care.
Take care of yourself, Doctor. Exonation, my guest this hour has been Dr. John Young. His website is www.younghealth.com, and for all concerns pertaining medical matters, www.cdc.gov. And if you believe that there's a chance that anyone you know may have EV-D68, get them to a medical practitioner at your earliest convenience. We'll be back. Don't go away.